It's time for the Multifamily Network podcast. Let's start the party.
Welcome to the Multifamily Network, the #1 platform for the multifamily industry's hottest and trending topics. I'm your host, Matt Pasalacqua. Let's dive in and get this party started. Well, rock and roll. Well, Rush, thank you for coming on. I don't think I want to cue things up too specific. Just a conversation. We enjoy you coming on and talking with us. What I'd really love to do is, one, selfishly find out what good cigars you've had lately, because I'll tell you, I've made some bad picks over the past 2 weeks. I'm like, man, what am I doing? I just need to stick with what I know, because I know what I like. But then there's this part of me that always goes, no, you got to try something new. Well, that one's got to be good, and this one has this review, and I try it, and sometimes they're not bad. It's just not what I like, and I'm thinking to myself, why are you doing this to yourself? You just stick with what you know.
Well, I mean, part of the joy of cigars is, like most things, is getting to try new things, find what you like. But if you don't like it, I wouldn't waste your time on it or your money on it. But I smoked a 2014 St. Louis Rey Regios on Sunday. It's a Cuban cigar back from 2014. But I like Tatuajes. There's a lot of cigars I like, but that's the most recent one I smoked.
I'm getting off track now. I know we're supposed to be talking about telecom and our business, but any excuse I get to spark up a cigar with you, Rush, or even virtually, it's great, right?
Yeah.
So, well, cool. Well, thanks for coming on. Really, I just want to kick it off by just having you jump in. Really, what we wanted to do is we're all on the support side of the world, meaning we're kind of middle ground folks. The Blueport's on the support side of the orgs. We don't do a lot of direct business directly with partners or with clients anyways. For instance, some of the RealtyCom clients, we rarely, if ever, work directly with them. We work through our partners because we're a support org. And with RealtyCom doing what RealtyCom does, we thought it'd be a good time to just have a discussion surrounding what it's like being in that space and learning more about RealtyCom. And I'll cue it up like this, and Keith, add any color where you feel it's needed. But what I'd love to hear you chat about is what makes RealtyCom different. What is it that you guys do? Because when you hear the word quote unquote consultant in the industry and in the world, people make up whatever they want. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I'll let you kind of run with it. Keith, did I miss anything?
No, love to hear from Rush.
Yeah, rock and roll.
Sure. So RealtyCom Partners is a telecommunications and technology consulting company. We work with owners and developers in the apartment space, and to a lesser degree in the single family space for build to rent. And we work with our clients to help them prepare or help them execute on their strategies related to resident-facing telecom, mainly internet. As that comes in a variety of different forms. We've been in business for 17 years. So in the beginning, it was almost all marketing agreements with more than one providers to have the opportunity to serve their residents, and in return, the owner would usually get paid some sort of revenue share or upfront fees in exchange for doing so. Certainly, that's morphed to a greater extent towards single provider bulk internet managed Wi-Fi as well. But our goal is, first and foremost, to help our clients execute on or formulate and then execute on their strategies. We're agnostic, so if they want to go down one road or the other, we're going to help them execute on that. And when it comes to mainly the topic at hand lately of managed Wi-Fi, we work with them to determine what they want to do at their properties, when they want to do it. And ultimately, we'll go out to bid to a mix of providers that we feel will meet their needs. And we just published an article yesterday, I think it was, on LinkedIn about choosing the right provider for managed Wi-Fi.
Yeah, saw that. Very good article.
Yeah, so when I go to conferences, it's hard to keep all providers happy. And, you can't. It just doesn't make sense to go out on an RFP to 15 different providers. So what we try to do is we try to pick the right mix of, say, between 3 and 5 providers for a property based upon a number of factors, like I mentioned in the article, property considerations. Some providers excel at garden style, others do not. Some providers, will do a site survey. Others prefer to do a desk survey, and so we'll try to pick the right mix of providers that are going to meet the needs of the client. Go out to bid, get the proposals, negotiate them, and ultimately present to our clients to put them back in the driver's seat to make a decision. And then we'll help that client and work with the provider to move through the stages of getting it contracted. We're not attorneys. Most of our clients prefer to use telecom counsel, and we'll help them through that process by reviewing red lines. But the most important process we play after that is helping through the deployment stage, working through the project management, ensuring that things are done correctly throughout the deployment stage as well.
I don't want to steal your thunder, but you guys represent a lot of units across your portfolio. What is it? 750,000, maybe more now, something like that.
Yeah, it's in that range.
Everything you just listed, you don't get that with a lot of some of the other firms. Maybe you'll get one or the other. There's a lot of people that can consult on maybe technology and networks. There's other folks that can consult on, right of entry and terms and conditions from a non-legal perspective, right? To your point, and things like that. What do you believe are some of the kind of, if you had to pick, you call it top 5, top 3, top 2, what are the things specifically that you believe sets your firm apart from others, if you had to classify maybe the top however many?
Yeah. So first of all, there are a lot of fine companies out there in the space. A lot of them I've known for many years. So certainly not going to knock anybody. I think one of the few things that sets us apart. Number one, we're not here just to broker a transaction. We're typically engaged by our clients on all of their assets, regardless of the fact that maybe most of those assets, there's nothing that we can do today. They have long-term agreements in place. And so our engagement starts with doing contractual due diligence. And so we want to understand what the lay of the land is today. We're here as a resource for our clients, whether or not there's something that we can do for a transaction today. And so second, we have, one of the largest teams, I think, in this space. We have nearly 40 people. Most of them come from either a real estate or a telecom background. I myself came from a telecom background. And so we're working with our clients, again, as I mentioned earlier, to help put together their strategy or execute on their given strategy. And we feel that being engaged on all of the portfolio, being here to holistically review the portfolio, help them get around landmines like long-term auto renewals. For example, take that property that has an agreement out, it's expiring this year. Maybe they don't want to make a change today, but they don't want that to go into a 1 or a 2 year auto renewal period. We're going to be proactively reviewing those and alerting them when it's time to send out a notice of non-renewal. So we have a number of different ways in which we can work with our clients from a fee perspective, but ultimately at the end of the day, we're agnostic as to which direction they go. We just want to help them achieve their goals.
I'd have experience on the ISP side and working directly,
Sure.
right? And I can tell you that from that perspective, there's a lot of people out there wondering from a provider or a solutions provider standpoint, whether it be IoT, managed Wi-Fi, retail, in that garden style environment you're talking to, that may want to do business with RealtyCom, and vice versa. There's partners and whom you represent that are probably curious more about what RealtyCom does, and did a fantastic job recapping that as well. But from the switching gears to the ISP side or the solutions provider side, MSP side, take your pick. What I can tell you, a lot of the times what they're thinking is, oh, RealtyCom, okay, consult, great. I'm thinking RFPs, I'm thinking leads, I'm thinking business transactions, I'm thinking what can I do to get in the driver's seat? And it'd be great if you could dive into that a little bit by example of what it takes to do business with RealtyCom, but also if we can have a part 2 to that, and that part 2 to that would be, what aren't they thinking? Obviously, the immediate thing is, let's get some RFPs, let's answer some bids. What should they, before even contacting you, should they be getting, their ducks in a row? What does something like that look like? What are you looking for when you're working with the ISPs, MSPs, and solutions providers?
Great question. So again, we're looking for providers that are qualified, that have experience especially when we're talking about managed Wi-Fi. Providers that have experience with those types of deployments, with the type of property, whether we're talking about garden style, mid-rise, high-rise, mixed use, etc. Because I mentioned earlier that most of our clients use telecom counsel, it's certainly helpful, if not a requirement, to have a template worked out with one of those two attorneys that our clients use. Most importantly, we want to build a relationship with that provider. We want to understand the nuances of how they deploy, because the technology blends together. So many of the providers and ISPs out there are using the same types of technology. We want to understand what sets them apart, what geographic areas they can serve or they want to serve in. And then ultimately, as a new provider contacts us or contacts a client and the client puts us in touch with them, we'll have a hold of vetting call with them and ask those types of conversations. There's really no requirements to do business with us other than the fact that we want to make sure we're selecting providers for an RFP process that are going to meet our clients' needs. And there are a lot of new entrants in the space. It's great to have competition. I think, the whole rising tide lifts all boats, makes other providers more competitive. But ultimately, we don't want to be the guinea pig. So we're going to sit back and wait and make sure that provider has had positive deployments. People that we know and trust in the industry have worked with them and they've had positive results. And then also, as I mentioned, we're going to, as we go in each RFP, we're going to pick a number of providers off of our preferred provider list that are going to meet those needs the best, and then work with them. So that unfortunately means that we're not going to be able to pick some or all of the providers that happen to be on that list. We're just going to try to pick the ones that make the most sense based upon geographic considerations, property type considerations, etc.
Would it be fair then, Rush, to say that there's not necessarily metrics? Somebody can go check all the boxes to do business with you guys, but their portfolio, their reputation in the space, and what they can bring to you as examples of success, is that more important?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. And likewise, on the other side of that, as we have experience, or people that we know and trust have experience with providers that are not so positive, we will do the opposite. We'll start to take them off of our list. Literally, we have a green, yellow, red on our provider list. You can imagine what those are. Green means go, yellow means caution, red means stop. And so, unfortunately, we do occasionally have to move providers down that rung if we're experiencing issues. And again, the green providers are the only ones that we're going to go out in an RFP with. And so it's best to have plenty of experience, good positive deployments behind them, great customer service, a history of exceeding and meeting clients' expectations. We don't check financials, but it's obviously good to have financial backing. This is not it's a capital intensive business, especially as many providers look to try to spread their wings across the entire country and be able to deploy services anywhere. But ultimately, again, it's, our goal is to meet our clients' expectations or exceed them by choosing a mix of providers that will provide proposals, scopes of work, and ultimately positive deployment and great customer service.
So can I read you a list of providers and you just say red, green, or yellow?
Absolutely not.
Can't blame a guy for trying, man.
Well, industry insight real quick.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's really helpful. I know there's gonna be a lot of even of our partners that are going to soak up everything you just said. Is very important, helps us out as well on the support side. When we have conversations with our partners and support them, and hey, who are you doing business with? Who's this RFP for? Oh, it's with RealtyCom. Well, great. Did you watch this episode with Rush? Did you listen to what he said? Switching gears though, your ideal clients, we're not even say ideal clients, let's just say your partners, the people you're doing business with. I will selfishly give you guys a plug and say I wish more portfolio owners, REITs, what have you, anybody looking to do business in the space for these solutions should definitely reach out to RealtyCom, should be reaching out to you. What is something that they should prepare before reaching out to you?
Well, first, let me start off by saying, we have We have clients at the very, that are very, very, very large, very high up on the NMHC top 50. We have clients that are very, very, very small and really everywhere in between. But I would say most of our clients sort of in the middle are, have, let's call it, 8 to 20,000 units, a number of different geographic regions. But it really doesn't matter to us. We want to be able to help our clients succeed. And so you really don't have to have anything. Certainly a property list is a great start. That's certainly the first thing we ask for after a conversation with a prospective client. It'll help us better understand the portfolio, the geographic considerations, and also help us put together a proposal for them. But we want to be able to walk them through our process. And I only mentioned a few pieces of it here on the call. We want to walk them through what that engagement would look like, how we can assist them, what some of the things that we will need to be able to be successful. But just come to the conversation. It's great to walk away from a conversation where both parties have learned something. If you have some bad experiences in telecom, which certainly I think we all probably have had, if you have issues in the portfolio you're looking to try to solve today, bring those items as well.
What do you think drives people? Like when people come to you, Rush, are they running from bad experiences? Have they heard of the potential of better experience? Are they just confused because providers keep calling them and pitching them things? Like, what drives them to come to RealtyCom or Rush directly?
I mean, really, all of the above, right? I would say these days it's less running from bad things and more they want to move in a positive direction. Obviously, so many of our clients, all of our clients are talking about managed Wi-Fi, whether they're doing it or not. On the existing property side, it's still nowhere near a majority of those properties are moving towards managed Wi-Fi, but they're all talking about it. And so I would say probably 75% of the prospects that are coming to us now are coming because they want to talk about how they can move that direction. And it's not rocket science, but by the same token, there's a process in place that has to be gone through to ultimately achieve, I think, a positive experience through deployment, whether it's a conventional property, student, or single family.
So go with that a little bit, if you don't mind. So I think you've said at one point there's 1% of properties that exist have adopted managed Wi-Fi, or less than 1%.
I mean, so I don't know if I would say 1%. I think, certainly from all I can speak about is what we see. On the new construction side, it's probably approaching 50%, and it probably would be greater, if some of the developers had gotten into that part of the process earlier, or had gotten looked towards managed Wi-Fi early in the process, because it's capital intensive. It's obviously they're sort of dependent upon network considerations being installed, infrastructure being installed beforehand. On the existing property side, it's certainly a small percentage that are actually deploying it. A number of our clients are doing it actively, not necessarily entire portfolio wide, but certainly looking at particular assets to do it. And as a tangent, a lot of our clients are looking to deploy bulk internet, but are not necessarily looking at managed Wi-Fi because of capital constraints, because of infrastructure constraints. They don't want to upset the apple cart with the residents and have to do infrastructure deployments. So it's hard to put a percentage on what percentage you're doing that, but it's still relatively very low.
So you split a hair, and I'd like for you to unpackage this a little bit, because most of the time when it's managed, it's bulk, but not always when it's bulk is it managed, right? And you just made a distinction. So unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, precisely right. So under the umbrella of bulk internet, there's essentially two directions you can go. The unmanaged typical modem in an apartment where you sign an agreement with the provider, and they either will pre-deploy something in the unit, or the resident's responsible for getting a modem in their unit, but the resident's not paying anything directly to the providers unless they decide to upgrade. But when that resident wants to go down to the common area or go to a friend's unit, they're having to change that wireless network, ask for an access code. Managed or more specifically property-wide managed Wi-Fi is a service that's managed by a provider that where the resident can roam throughout the property where there are access points anyway, roam to the common area, go to their friend's unit 2 floors down, 2 buildings over, and they still have their network. They're not having to ask for access to their Wi-Fi. And so bulk internet, sort of generally, there's a lot of interest for that with our clients. A lot of interest, but not all clients are interested today in doing managed Wi-Fi. And just to I mentioned some of those considerations. It could be infrastructure, it could be capital, but there are many benefits to a managed product that I think make it a better opportunity. Again, notwithstanding capital considerations and infrastructure considerations, but chief among them, I think the resident experience. In the modem bulk situation, when the resident gets their keys Friday at 6 p.m., what are they going to do? They have to wait till Monday, right, to call up the provider to get something installed. In a managed environment, that resident moves in, they're able to get on very, very quickly. And so there are also some efficiency benefits for the owner. They can have their asset management team and their maintenance team be able to use that network throughout the property. It's foundational for IoT services, other prop tech opportunities for the property. You can, if you have bad cell coverage, you can use it for Wi-Fi calling. So there's a tremendous number of benefits to the managed product, which makes a lot of our clients look in that direction today.
Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely. And that was a great segue into some of the other additional question I was going to have as I fade into my background in my cigar lounge, fancy, background here. But I was actually going to ask that, what are you seeing from a paradigm shift, not just in managed Wi-Fi, but in smart communities and adoption rates across the board in general? And you touched on some of that. Hey, you're seeing about 50% from the managed Wi-Fi perspective from Greenfield, not as much from a retrofit or what was coined. I think you and I were on a panel together. I believe I was moderating, and the term and that broadband community summit was vintage, right? So vintage instead of brownfield or retrofit. So vintage communities, right? So we're seeing less there. What are you seeing from a smart adoption rate in general, encompassing all things? If you don't mind speaking on it, from IoT, smart thermostats, leak detection, hubs integrated into the wall, into the unit, as well as managed Wi-Fi, because I believe managed Wi-Fi is some of that gasoline that fuels all of those things that properties need. Are you seeing, this is the chicken and the egg perspective, are you seeing them adopt IoT, which leads to managed Wi-Fi, or are you seeing them leading with managed Wi-Fi and then adopting IoT, or is it a mixture of both? Call me dumb, whatever. But what do you see there?
I like to say existing communities, because vintage when you think of vintage wine makes me think of older. While there certainly are many older communities, existing could be a property that was completed 24 months ago.
Well, let me just say I appreciate that, Rush, because coax from the 80s would fall under vintage, and I go back further than the 80s, and that hurts my feelings, man.
So do I. So do I.
Go ahead, bud.
I don't think there's not necessarily one funnel that they would fall through. It's not necessarily the chicken or the egg. I think certainly there are many of our clients, many property owners today that have rolled out IoT, but have not rolled out managed Wi-Fi.
Interesting.
I mean, there are cell-based SIM card solutions for those hubs, but that's not foolproof. We've all, I'm sure we've all lived in apartments at one time in our life. They have, especially depending on the build, they can have cell phone issues. And so if the residents are having calling issues, then that smart hub is having potential issues as well. So it's definitely, as I mentioned, it's foundational. Managed Wi-Fi is foundational for those types of things. But the property owners that are coming to us and looking to deploy managed Wi-Fi, it's not always because they have an IoT rollout in the future, plan for the future. It's a number of different things. It's trying to improve services to the residents. It's trying to improve efficiency for the property as well. But I really can't speak to percentages, but certainly it's coming from, I would say, both directions, if not more.
Yeah, and the reason I asked that is we've seen an influx in the types of partners that we do business with, without dropping names, perspective, that I wouldn't say they fall outside of the ISP world, but they're definitely looking for managed Wi-Fi support and partnerships. Um, Due to what you just mentioned, some of that 3G, 4G, 5G SIM card adoption stuff, and they're needing a solution to help push their products and solutions, right? And it's been very interesting, to say the least, because you don't want to have a conversation saying that those types of solutions aren't good, because there's a lot of things that they solve, a lot of problems that they solve. But at the same time, I think we can all agree that constant connectivity, it really is the key to running a property from an IoT or technology perspective. So it's what advice would you give, if you would, if a client contacts you today and says, hey, listen, IoT is going to be really important in our community, we're thinking of adopting this product for our leak detection, everything else, it's using a central hub that works off 5G or this, we're not sure if that's great, should we build a redundant network, should we do both? It works off both Wi-Fi and SIM cards. When one fails or the other, there's some redundancy there. What advice would you give? Would you give them advice to go one direction or the other, or would you, I don't know, take it from there? What would your advice be to them?
Yeah, so it's hard to give advice on this call very generally. A lot of it's going to depend upon what types of assets, what not to overuse the word, but what vintage they're from, what infrastructure they have currently. Do those properties have capital allocated? Obviously, when owners buy properties, they're generally allocating a certain amount of capital, but they may have owned that property for 5 years and know that capital exists anymore. So it's going to be different for each one. I think certainly we want to understand what their goals are, and if one of those goals and objectives is to roll out a successful IoT prop tech deployment, it's very beneficial to have an owner network. It's not the only path, but it's a great path. I feel. Now there are some things in the gray area. I think we talked about modem bulk. We talked about managed Wi-Fi. There are some gray area things coming down the road. Some providers are looking to layer on SSIDs the owner can use for IoT without having to commit to a managed product. I think that's very positive. Again, it's not necessarily a one size fits all program, but it's going to be great for some owners who would choose to have IoT but don't want to have to go managed Wi-Fi, or don't want to go to managed Wi-Fi for whatever reason. Now, just end by saying again, there's never going to be a one size fits all solution. I think it's understanding some of the specific concerns the property owner may have, what their plans are, and the specifics about the property, and then try to develop a plan that will work.
You said something that set off a light bulb. Definitely wanted to have the discussion, and I guess this is a good time to transition because you mentioned it. You said owner-owned network or property-owned network, and I would love your perspective on this, and I believe a lot of people would. Do you believe it is beneficial or more beneficial for the ownership group or portfolio to own that network, that IoT, that managed Wi-Fi network, that system? And if so, why? Or are there times where it's beneficial for the provider to come in and say, hey, I'm going to give you an OEM product or this, we're going to pay for everything, but it's only good if we use it. You'll get managed Wi-Fi, you'll get this, you'll get all the benefits of it, but it's going to be ours and we're going to own it. So therefore, but anyways, take it from there.
Again, I'll preface this by saying there's not ever going to be a one size fits all solution, but I think if the owner has capital allocated and can pay for that network, there are some benefits to having it owned by them. It gives them the utmost flexibility for what they may want to do in the future. I also advise them that it's not necessarily a buy once solution, right? As technology changes and shifts, they may have to do additional investments in infrastructure and additional investments potentially in equipment to be able to keep the property on the forefront. But I think there definitely are benefits. Being locked into in the OEM type option you mentioned, being locked into a situation where it only works with that one provider. It may be great today if that provider is executing according to plan, but if things start to move a different direction and now you're stuck where you can't move, I never think that's a good idea. But again, there's no one size fits all solution. It's really going to depend upon a number of factors.
So we hear a lot of pitches of what makes managed Wi-Fi great, and it's cool to hear the people selling it, talk about why a property owner should go with it, right? But do you have an opinion or any feedback based on what you're seeing from your client groups? I understand there's no one size fits all and people have different considerations, but we hear, hey, managed Wi-Fi is great if your only consideration is NOI, or managed Wi-Fi is great if your only consideration, even just for the selling point of resident experience or running your community, having hidden networks for your staff to use, etc. And I understand we could throw that all in a bucket and say, hey, each one of those is a good point. Would you say that there is a reason that clients gravitate towards more as to why they go with managed Wi-Fi? Or are we crossing the streams a little bit from Ghostbusters and causing some danger by claiming one or the other, right? 80s kids, sorry.
Sure. So the opportunities that managed Wi-Fi gives a property owner, the efficiencies it gives them, the resident experience improvements, the NOI improvements, those are all great factors, and there are many more. Obviously, I think chief among them is the foundational nature of it for PropTech. I feel, and I've said this actually, I said this at a conference 2 years ago, if NOI is your one and only focus, you probably shouldn't do it, because it's as you know, it's not rocket science, but you have to choose the right provider. You have to ensure you're getting a scope of work that makes sense given the property, ensure you're getting the right equipment being put in place, and you have to make sure that deployment goes well. And as you know, that deployment might take 120 or 180 days post contract being signed. And there is, in some cases, again, depending upon whether it's existing property versus new, you're putting in new infrastructure versus using the old infrastructure, there is potentially a resident impact as well. So I think doing it just for the money is probably not the right move. Certainly the NOI improvement is a benefit, but I wouldn't even put it in my top 4.
Wow.
What would you put in there?
That's great.
Hold on, I'm curious. I want to know.
I think number 1 is resident experience. I think,
okay.
Again, it's a highly competitive world that our clients are in. They're competing for residents' eyeballs, competing for their rent dollars, and I think improving that residents' experience is my number 1.
Got it.
That's fantastic.
What would be 2 and 3? You said wouldn't be top 4. What's 2?
It wouldn't be 2 and 3. So I think number 2 is being the foundational nature for PropTech. Number 3 is probably owner efficiency. So maybe call NOI number 4. But again, I think residents pay the bills, right? Residents' rent dollars are what makes the world go round in our business, and so I think improving their lifestyle by having services that are on when they move in. It's always on. It works as they work. If they want to take their laptop down to the pool and take a Zoom call, they can.
Yeah. No, I think that's gold, though. That's gold to hear. Providers live in a provider world, and we see things one way, right? What is it? If you're a hammer, everything's a nail.
Right.
So we find that money justifies something, and you hear providers talk about it all the time. I think it's gold to hear the other things, and that's number 4. I think is solid. I like it. I like that.
I'm very glad I asked that question, because that was definitely something I wanted to get your take on, Rush, and that is extraordinarily interesting, to put it that way. And it makes sense, and you are absolutely right. A lot of times people are losing sight on the fact that it's residents that make the world go round in our business here. You're absolutely right, and that's where the focus needs to be. NOI is great. always on is fantastic, all these things, but let's list them in the list of importance. Are we solving these first top three before our first pitch to what RealtyCom's clients or anyone else in the industry is? Hey, you're going to make some great money on this. Okay, fantastic. But are you solving my problem? Are you? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've heard Ian Davis say something to this nature about, why would you let, something that might make you, $30 or $40 per unit per month potentially damage, $100 million or more property. So again, it's, what's the driving factor? The driving factor are the residents. And I think first and foremost, trying to solve for their concerns and then go from there is best.
Again, to your point where you're talking about what Ian Davis was saying, hey, don't let a $30 or $40 spiff per unit ruin your $100 million project. I remember when he said that. I believe it was at OpTech a couple years ago, and he had made that comment. Hey, if your only sales pitch to the clients is you're going to make some money on this, you're barking up the wrong tree, bub, I think was his exact quote. Keith, anything to add or questions as it relates to some of the things we've talked about thus far?
Yeah, look, I feel like I'm definitely butting upon taking up more of Rush's time than he cared to for me today. But I did want to know, like, what gets somebody on the red list? Like, want to do business with you, want to call you. What gets them on the red list?
I would say failed deployments or more than one failed deployment. It's communication, as is key. Being able to within a reasonable time frame, respond to inquiries, respond to not just to RFPs. RFPs certainly are the starting point, but respond when there are issues.
Yeah.
It's not a small thing for a provider to fall off of the green list, but it does happen. I think certainly issues with deployment are probably number one.
I halfway expect you to say Black and Mild cigars, but
no, not at all.
That's Swisher Sweets.
Swisher Sweets.
Yeah. Sending Rush a box of Swisher Sweets.
Rush, I just appreciate you taking time. It's always fun to talk
my
to
pleasure,
you.
guys.
Well, I'd love to wrap up. Just kind of asking you, Rush, if people wanted to learn more about you, more about your business, more about RealtyCom, what's the best way to reach you, both from a potential client for you guys' perspective or ISP or MSP that wants to get a hold of you? What's the best way to get in touch with RealtyCom? How do they find you?
If you want to find me, it's R. Blakely, Blakely at RealtyComPartners.com. Most of the providers out there know our bidding team. If not, you can certainly send it to info@RealtyComPartners.com, or feel free to email me or email Bob Reese. He runs our bidding team for providers. But our website has plenty of information about us and who our team members are. It's also a good spot to start as well. But I'm always happy to get an email or take a phone call.
Awesome. And then as far as networking, any place that your group is going to be to meet you in person, anything like that, places that kind of the common shows or conferences to go to get an audience with RealtyCom?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be at most years we go to broadband. It's got a lot of pull there for me. I've been going to that show for a very, very long time. We'll be there. We'll be at OpTech. We'll be at a few shows in between, but we're just working on finalizing the travel schedule and the budgets right now. But for sure, Broadband Summit and OpTech.
Awesome.
Do y'all think it's even fair to bring up Bob without giving him the nod to the work he does being Santa Claus? Because I think that is just a fantastic thing he does every year.
Yeah, he is. For those who don't know, you could probably find something on our website about that. But Bob and his wife play Mr. and Mrs. Santa Claus, or I guess Santa Claus and Mrs. Claus is the right way to say it. And they will go out and all monies go to his charity. And so he look, for those who don't know Bob, he absolutely looks the part. It's all natural. He just trimmed his beard a week ago. It's still quite long, but he had it in full Santa Claus mode for sure.
Here it is. Hold on. I think I can do this very quickly, but I feel like
it's worth it. I'll wait. It's worth it.
Of the things you hear about,
there we go.
Is that not the best, Mr. and Mrs. Claus?
It really is.
And then to do that every year just to raise money for worthwhile causes, I think is fantastic.
No, 100%.
That's our plug for
Bob's a
Bob.
great guy.
In front of him, I'm going to pick on him, but here we'll say nice things.
Of course. Of course. Well, I appreciate both of you guys. Thanks for taking the time today.
We appreciate you, Rush, as always. Thank you so very much.
Take care.
Have a good one, brother.
Talk soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.